data seems to suggest that cybercrime is getting a more serious threat. The UK Cabinet Office recently said just in the UK it's costing us £27 billion a year. But from where you're standing, how serious is that threat?
Well, it's been getting more and more serious every single year. I've been watching it. And over these 20 years that I've been fighting online crime and online attackers, it seems that we just seem to be unable to fix these things. And we actually seem to be unable even to quantify them. Numbers like 27 billion sound impressive, but I mean, it's actually very hard to count on how much money we're losing because of cybercrime and cyber sabotage or cyber attacks of all kinds. So the amount of money we lose has nothing to do with the amount of money the criminals are actually pocketing, and even that is massive.
So how vulnerable are we?
Well, there are great examples of where we're getting better. I mean, people keep asking me, how come we can't fix these things? How come we can't make an operating system or an application which couldn't be hacked? And we just can't. I mean, it's like, could somebody build a perfect lock which couldn't be picked? No, we can't. You take the 10 best guys on the planet to pick locks and give them unlimited budget and time, and they will be able to figure out a way. And exactly the same thing applies to our computers.
So tell us, you spend your time chasing them. Who are the bad guys?
Well, this is a crucial thing to understand because people very often get confused about the attackers and start building defenses without really understanding who we're fighting. And we have totally different groups out there launching these attacks. We can group them into multiple different groups, but the way I like to group them is based on their motives. And that brings us into three main groups. And that would be criminals who do it to make money, to hacktivists who don't do their attacks to make money, who do their attacks to send a message or for a political motive. And then, as a fairly new group, we have governmental attacks. So attacks where governments and nation states are creating malware and launching attacks.
So let's pick them apart. The criminals. I mean, we've got the stereotype of the guy in his bedroom somewhere in Eastern Europe trying to target your bank account. Is that the reality, or is it more organized?
Well, that's the way it used to be. We can actually play a series of mugshots of online attackers who've been caught recently, so we can get to see some faces behind these crimes. And indeed, it used to be fairly simple. It used to be the teenager writing viruses in the bedroom for fun or for challenge. Then we started seeing more money-making activity, which early on was fairly simple by using infected computers to send spam. But then we started to see more organized activities. So banking Trojan gangs creating malware to steal money from online bank accounts while people are doing online banking, all the way to keyloggers, which will steal credit card numbers when people type them in from their keyboards, to ransom Trojans, which take over computers and want money for you to open up the computer. So it is actually fairly organized, and we've seen gangs which have made millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in profit out of these attacks. And we have to remember this is tax-free.
So tell us about a couple of your friends. So there was a nice chap lying down with a gun.
That's the guy with the gun is Dmitry Golubov from Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine. He was running a credit card theft ring a couple of years ago. The last I've heard of him is actually he's been out from jail where he was sentenced for a while, and he was running for parliament in Ukraine. It was an interesting career move.
Well, he's going to boost the economy.
Sure, yes. He certainly knows how to make money.
Do you feel at personal risk if you're trying to monitor these guys?
Well, I've never been threatened. So I know some people who work in this industry who have been threatened, so we do take some precautions. But really, it isn't like the real-world police work, really.
So you talked about the activists, the hacktivists. 2 or 3 years ago, nobody here would have known about Anonymous. How important a threat is this?
Well, it is now one of the main three groups of attackers. And hacktivists really aren't after money. They want something else. It could be as simple as retaliating against a perceived threat or a perceived wrongness. For example, Sony was hacked 37 times last year, mostly because they went into a court case over somebody modifying their own PlayStation, and then it was as a movement wanted to retaliate that. But some of these guys, we've seen that when they gain access to systems, some of them get greedy. Like they see something valuable, like a collection of credit card numbers, and then they just start stealing stuff instead of trying to send a message. And then we simply move them from one group to another. I mean, they're no longer hacktivists, now they're criminals. Mm-hmm.
So the third threat, you said, was the nation state. So obviously China comes top of mind. How active are the Chinese?
Chinese activity has been, we first started seeing them in around 2005, and back then it was just espionage. And here, attribution is very complicated. People keep pointing the finger towards China and Chinese government and the Chinese army, the PLA. In practice, this has been very hard to prove or link back all the way through. And in fact, although China gets the blame for many of the attacks, we also should assume that at least some of the attacks, and for example, some of the espionage stuff we see online, isn't done by the Chinese, but it's made to look like it's done by the Chinese, because there's an easy scapegoat. But the fact is that we see cyber capabilities being displayed by basically any advanced nation. And it's not just espionage. For example, the German government has been using Trojans in criminal investigations where they infect a suspect's computer with a Trojan, with a backdoor, so the government can monitor what you're doing on your computer. And this, it sounds horrible, in many ways it is, but it's actually a very clear path which has led us to that. I mean, 10 years ago, if somebody was suspect for a crime, his phone would be tapped, his landline phone would be tapped. Today, his mobile phone would be tapped, his internet connection would be tapped. But it doesn't really tell much, even if the operator is monitoring all of your internet traffic, because a big part of your traffic is encrypted. So the only way really for authorities to see that traffic is to have a backdoor on the computer. And that brings us into a situation where even Western nations are creating backdoors and Trojans which they use against their own citizens.
Let's look specifically at the Chinese, because I know Google has had some trouble. I know that the Nobel Peace Prize has had some trouble.
We've had several cases where, for example, the Nobel case was after 2 years ago when Liu Xiaobo, one of the Chinese dissidents, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and right after that, like 5 days later, the Nobel Peace Prize Foundation website was hacked with an attack which was infecting everybody who visited the website with a backdoor. And you really start to wonder, like what's going on here? Who would have the motive to launch attacks like these? And as I said, Chinese government keeps denying any link back to them. But let's actually play a video. We have a video which was shown on Chinese governmental channel CCTV7 last year, which was a governmental propaganda video called Cyberstorm is Rising. And that's a 20-minute documentary produced by the Chinese government. It talks about cyber attacks and cyber war and how the Chinese PLA army is protecting the citizens against Western aggression. But there's an interesting detail in the video at around minute 12. So if you just look at what's happening, and if you freeze for a moment at this application we see on screen right here, because throughout this video they show a lot of different code on screen and people at the keyboard and lots of fast cuts. But for 2 seconds, they are shooting a screen which has this Windows application there, and somebody is operating the application. And if you actually translate that, it says Copyright People's Liberation Army. Then it says select target, and we can see somebody using the mouse and selecting a target from the list. And then there's 2 buttons, and he clicks the button which says attack. And the IP address, which we see up there, is actually an IP address in the United States of America.
Smart.
So this would seem like a smoking gun, maybe?
Go get them, guys. So probably the most high-profile example of what we assume is one state hitting another state is the Stuxnet virus that took out part of the Iranian nuclear program. So who was behind Stuxnet?
Well, it was the United States.
How do you know?
Well, actually, I don't know, and that's the key part. I do believe it was the United States, most likely with the Israelis. In fact, I do believe Stuxnet was the end result of George W. Bush signing a cyber attack program against the Iranian nuclear program in 2008. But the key part here is that I can't prove it. So cyber arms or cyber attacks, cyber sabotage like this, gives you deniability. And that's exactly why we are right now seeing governments around the world starting to stockpile on cyber arms like these, because they work, they're fairly cheap, and they give you deniability. So for all we can see, we are right now in the middle of some sort of a cyber arms race, which is starting right now.
And the Iranians are also getting their own revenge by finding ways to access people's Gmail accounts in rather clever ways.
Indeed. What we're seeing is totalitarian states like Iran or Syria or Libya, governments trying to monitor their own citizens for revolutionary people or for dissidents. And we saw actually a sad case with the Iranian government trying to monitor their own people. And just like because they couldn't just monitor the traffic because the revolutionary people were effectively using foreign services which were outside of Iran, and they were using encrypted services, like for example Gmail. Most of the email connectivity between Iranian dissidents were over Gmail, because Gmail is always SSL encrypted, which means the local government can't read what you're doing. Even if you tap the internet connection, it's encrypted. So as an end result, we saw a case where Iranians hacked into a foreign certificate authority in the Netherlands to generate 27 rogue SSL certificates with which they could then set up local fake copies of gmail.com, hotmail.com, live.com, skype.com, facebook.com, and the local people who were using these services actually ended up on a service which was used to track them and trap them. And we believe it's actually likely people died in Iran because of this.
So we're moving very quickly to the mobile internet. People were educated to put antivirus in their PCs, but we don't fit antivirus in our mobile phones, our tablets. How vulnerable are we?
Well, I guess the mobile side best shows us that we are capable of learning. Because, for example, if you look at the iPhone, next month it's 5 years old, and we've had 0 attacks, 0 Trojans, 0 viruses against the iPhone, because it's a very locked down system. But of course, these mobile systems, the more open you have them, the more vulnerabilities you will have. On Android systems by Google, we have seen attacks, a few thousand of them, which sounds like a big number, but then when you compare it to the amount of attacks we see on traditional Windows computers, we see millions of attacks there. But the truth is, we are seeing the attackers move to where the customers are or where the victims are. And obviously, we are all moving to the mobile world, so the criminals are moving there as well.
So it's just been announced that Chrome has just overtaken Internet Explorer, according to StatCounter, to be the most used web browser. Can we trust Chrome? Is it secure?
Chrome is actually excellent in security senses. And I'm not saying that just because we are at the Google event. I mean, looking at real-world statistics from people who surf the web and happen to visit a website which has an exploit kit waiting, users surfing with IE or Firefox, in practice, have a much higher risk of getting infected than users with Chrome. And I do believe that's one of the reasons why Chrome bypassed IE in popularity globally just yesterday. After IE had been the #1 browser in the world for 14 years, Chrome became #1 yesterday.
This is editorial, this is not sponsored. Thank you, Mikko Hypponen.
Thank you.